and I hoped she was right. Chapter 33. During the next couple of weeks, Yejide spent her mornings in the hospital with my brother. She stopped talking to me, would just leave my breakfast on the dining table as though she was leaving food out for a dog, then tie Rotimi to her back and head to the hospital. I wished Dotun were dead, that he'd never been born. But this is a lie. What I wished was that I was dead, that I'd never been born. I brought Dotun into our home, invited him, cajoled him, threatened him, did everything I could to convince him. Never imagined that I would ever in 7 lifetimes have to see my brother thrusting into my wife, grunting like a pig as he came. As I factored unforeseen circumstances into my plan, I'd left out the things that would ruin it. Sickle cell, Dotun losing his job, and all the mess of love and life that only shows up as you go along. The day after my fight with Dotun, Mommy showed up in my office just before lunchtime. She didn't respond to my greetings, didn't take a seat. She came straight to my side of the desk and leaned over my chair. "You were both inside me," she cried, slapping her belly. "The two of you sucked these breasts that are on my chest. Was my breast milk not sweet? Is that the root of wickedness in your heart? Was my breast milk sour? Aki! Answer me. Can you not hear me? Are you now deaf?" She was so sure there was an explanation, that there was something I could say to help her understand what had happened. I could sense that she would take anything I said to her in that moment, anything at all, and shape it to suit herself, shape it into a reason that explained it all. All she needed was an answer. Any answer. I didn't say a word. "You want to kill me," she said, grabbing my shirt at the collar with both hands. "Make me understand why my own sons will try to kill each other. Tell me right now as I stand here." I could see her heart breaking. But what was I to say? The truth? I knew it would have finished her. This truth. She left with a promise never to speak to me until I explained why I'd tried to kill her precious son. I knew she would keep her promise. My mother could hate as fiercely as she loved. I worked until I was almost too tired to drive home, stumbled into the house when the lights were already out, and Yejide was asleep. But Rotimi was still awake, and her eyes latched onto me the moment I walked into the dimly lit room. I stood by her cot, listened to her soft babble, let her wrap her little fingers around my thumb. In her eyes, I was brand new, forgiven, unstained. I waited until she drifted off to sleep before I climbed into bed. And though I was worn out, I couldn't sleep. I stared at my wife and wondered if the rage pounding in my brains would ever be intense enough to make me smash a lamp into her head. I hated myself because I watched her delicate face until I fell asleep, etching each feature into my mind in case she was not there when I woke up. During the following weeks, I kept expecting her to leave me. It seemed to me that it was the only thing left to be done. Some nights, I traced her lips with a finger and whispered, "I'm sorry," into the silent space between us. I hated myself for this, too. On the day Dotun was to be discharged, Yejide spoke to me for the first time in over a month. She gave me his hospital bill. I wrote a check. That evening, she moved out of our bedroom. "I am staying because of my child. If not. She let the threat hang unspoken, like a dark cloud between us. "You blood. Did my brother behind my back. You are the unfaithful wife." I trembled when I said this, kept my fists in my pockets, fought the urge to plant them in her smug face because if I started I would never stop. "You would have preferred it in front of you, under your careful supervision. You are a cheat, a betrayer, and the biggest lie in heaven, hell, and on earth." She spat at my feet, entered her new room, slammed the door. I let the rage loose, punched the closed door until my skin bruised and bled, and even then I didn't stop, couldn't stop. Ejide didn't lock the door. There was no click, no key turning on the other side. It occurred to me that I could just turn the knob and go in, face her, ask her what she knew, what Dotun had told her about me while they were cavorting. I didn't have to stand alone in the corridor, speaking with my fists to a wooden door that wouldn't answer, lifting my shoulder so I could wipe sweat off my face with my shirt sleeve. Not tears. Sweat. Chapter 34. When my father-in-law invited Akin and me to a family meeting, I knew before we arrived in Ayeso that Moomi was the one who must have pushed him to call the so-called emergency meeting. I held Rotimi in front of me like a shield as we entered the sitting room, and sat beside each other on a brown couch. The couch was small, and for the first time since he'd caught Dotun on top of me, Akin and I sat right next to each other. We were so close I could feel him breathing. Dotun was already there, seated beside his father when we arrived. I had not seen him since he'd been discharged from the hospital. Moomi was the first to speak. My sons are here to explain why they fought, why they could not bring whatever disagreement they had to the family to settle. They are here to explain why they want to disgrace our family and make us the topic of gossip in the marketplace. No, stop there. You mean to you, Amope. They have disgraced you. The whole world knows my name is a good name in Ijesha land. Akin's father said. It is that way now, Baba. Now they are my sons. Useless man, of course they are my sons since you never spent a kobo on them. I paid the school fees, bought uniforms, and when they graduated from the university, you just showed up for the pictures. But now again, they have become my sons. Are they not your sons? Did you steal them from the hospital? Akin's father wagged a finger in Moomi's face. That is what you are here to tell us, that you stole them from a ward, Abi? He laughed at his own joke. Moomi hissed. But this is not your fault. It is the children of the orange tree that cause clubs and stones to be thrown at their mother. Foolish children! Explain yourselves! Explain! Speak the words that are lodged in your mouth. She glared at Akin, then at me, waving her arthritic hands at us like oversized claws. Dotun cleared his throat. His left hand was still in a sling. There was a bandage around his head, and one side of his face was covered in tiny stitches. We had an argument about money, Dotun said. Beside me, Akin's body relaxed with what I imagined was a sigh of relief. I should have been listening and committing the story Dotun was telling to memory. I should have mastered every detail to retell to relatives who were bound to quiz me later on, with expressions of concern, eager for gossip to dine with their pounded yam at family gatherings. But by then, I no longer cared about what Akin's family thought. I was letting go already, even though I did not know it yet. So I rocked Rotimi and fiddled with her necklace, pressing my thumb against the hard edges of the crucifix that lay beneath her blouse. I did listen when Akin began to speak. I was amazed by how easily he plugged the holes in his brother's story. It was as if they had rehearsed the lies over and over. The money was not mine. I borrowed it from the bank. After all I did, after all my sacrifices for him, how could Dotun gamble it away? Akin said, slapping his knee. Brother me, I did not gamble. It was a business that went bad. It was supposed to bring in more than enough money to pay off the loan, but many things went wrong. Dotun did not look in our direction as he spoke. His head was bent down, and he seemed to be staring at the crisscross patterns on the blue linoleum that covered the floor. It was not a business. If you were not so stupid, you would have known they were fraudsters. Wouldn't we all be rich if money doublers really existed? Money is a tiny thing, Akin's father said, tapping Dotun on the shoulder. Akin and Dotun, kept weaving the strands of their lies until their story was as strong as a rope of truth. You must not allow money to come between you. You have the same blood in your veins. What example do you want to leave for your children if you allow money to divide you? My father-in-law said, when his sons were quiet. Mommy snorted and shook her head, but her husband ignored her and kept talking. You must reconcile. Apologize to each other. The old man leaned forward in his seat and gestured with his hands. Unity. Every family must have unity. Have you forgotten? A single broomstick is useless, but when you put it in a bunch, what does it do? It sweeps the house until it is clean, Akin said. So you understand what I've been trying to say? My father-in-law said. Dotun touched the side of his face that was half covered with stitches. I am sorry, brother me. Don't be angry with me. I will find a way to get the money back for you. Akin coughed. It was the devil that used me, Dotun. That anger. I don't know where it came from. It is over. My father-in-law turned to face Moomi. Yeah, Akin. Are you at peace now? I told you Yejide had nothing to do with it. She cannot come between them for any reason. How can you even imagine she would be involved in such a thing? All I know, Moomi said, standing up and coming to stand in front of Akin and me. All I know is this. Anything that is done in the deep darkness will one day be talked about in the marketplace. I looked down at Rotimi and saw that she had fished out the crucifix from beneath her blouse and was now sucking on it. I removed it from her mouth, careful not to hurt her gums. Moomi leaned towards me. You can never cover the truth, just as nobody can cover the sun's rays with his hands. You can never cover the truth. Whenever I went into the salon, the first thing I did was hand Rotimi over to Iabolu. It was Iabolu who tied Rotimi to her back if she cried and followed her around the passageway after she started crawling. She was the one who noticed when her first tooth emerged and cheered on the day she clung to the leg of a stool to hoist herself up. Why are you behaving like this? Iabolu said, picking Rotimi up when she began to cry. Behaving how? I rinsed out a batch of rollers and put them in a colander. You did not even glance at her when I told you that she stood up. Is it not your business? She patted Rotimi's back and rocked her. I gave her the feeding bottle into which I had expressed breast milk in the morning. Maybe she is hungry. You? This woman? I've told you that this child is too old for just breast milk. Why are you behaving as if your ears have been nailed shut? Rotimi, sorry, Jerry. Manage her breast milk. Don't mind your mother. Just manage it this time. I was grateful for the silence when Rotimi began to suckle from the bottle's teat. The sun was already setting, and I had developed an ache around my knees and ankles from standing throughout the day. I reached for my purse and counted out some change for the two girls who had stayed behind to help with cleaning up. After the girls slung their handbags over their shoulders and left, I sat beneath a dryer and lowered the hood. Iabolu was still speaking to me, but from under the dryer it sounded as if she was speaking from a far-off place. Another room, another world. Her words did not seem so important while I stayed beneath the dryer. They were not things I needed to think about or respond to in any way. I shut my eyes to heighten the effect of being far from everything, of being alone. When are you going to make fresh fish and mash for Rotimi? Or even just buy formula and milk? I'm busy, I said, crossing my legs so I could massage my knee. Yeah, Rotimi. Fear God, you are too busy to buy formula for your baby. If there is something that is bothering you, let us talk about it. Get it off your mind so that you can take care of your child. Has she finished eating? We need to get home before it is totally dark. Come and snatch a bottle from her now. You are not even listening to what I am saying. She turned to the child. Rotimi, don't you worry. I will buy some formula for you very soon. Don't mind that woman. She will soon come back to her senses. I am sure. I yawned. Dotun came to the salon the next day while I was braiding a little girl's hair. I asked him to take a seat and wait because I never allowed the stylists in training to touch a child's hair. I believed their scalps were too tender to be used for training. When I was done braiding the hair, I took my time, rubbing pink oil into the lines in between each braid, and waited until the girls skipped out of the salon before I went to sit beside Dotun. Would you like something to drink? Coke or Fanta? No, he said, and sighed. I came to say goodbye. I'm leaving Elisha tomorrow, for Lagos. Oh, okay. Did you get a job in Lagos? Something like that. I did not ask him to elaborate, because I really did not care. The extent of my interest after Akin had injured him was to make sure that he lived. I wondered why he had come to me to say goodbye. I will miss you, he said. I looked at his face then. Really looked. The bandage around his head had been removed to reveal a large scar where the glossy stitches would never allow hair to grow again. He appeared to have lost some more weight, and there was a hopeful smile on his face. I wondered if he expected me to say that I would miss him too. Safe journey. You should greet your wife and children for me, I said. He looked away and touched the scar on his head. I went to Akin's office this morning. He told his secretary to send me away. Brother Akin, I said. You have no right to call him Akin. He is not your mate. Wait, Yejide, me? He jabbed his chest with a finger. You are angry with me? Keep your voice down. He shook his head. It is not my fault, you know, Yejide. It was all his idea. Dotun, you and your brother conspired against me. Look, Yejide, I thought you knew. He placed a hand on my knee. He said he was going to tell you everything. You need to go now, Dotun. You can see I'm at work. I don't have time for all this. I will miss you. This time, he whispered the words, and they sounded as if they were meant to convey something he could not say. I pushed his hand off my knee and stood up. Have a safe trip tomorrow. I walked away from him and went to an elderly woman who was hovering around the stylists, but had not taken a seat. Good afternoon, Ma, I said. Has nobody attended to you? Oh, they have, my dear, but I told them I would wait for you. I don't want anybody to ruin the scanty hair I have left. I smiled and led her to a chair. In the corner of my eye, I saw Dotun stop by the door to say hello to Iabolu and Rotimi before leaving the salon. I waited as the woman in front of me removed her scarf and thought about what Dotun had meant by repeating himself. He would miss me. The woman's hair was not scanty at all, but full and long, streaked with white in front. I remembered who she was as I ran my hands through her hair. She was a retired principal who came in to have her hair braided once a month and always insisted on using nothing other than the shea butter that she brought in a plastic container. Have I told you? Iabolu had come to stand beside me. Have I told you about my niece's wedding? No, I said, combing the retired principal's hair. It is happening next year, oh. My brother's first daughter is getting married. Was it not just yesterday they gave birth to her? Now what? I could see Iabolu's reflection in the mirror. She held Rotimi up and grinned at her. Before you know it, we'll be dancing at Rotimi's wedding too. I was sure she had said the same thing about Olamide and Chesson, and I was definitely not looking ahead as far as Rotimi's wedding. Hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. That is how it always seems, oh. Children grow up so fast, the retired principal said, smiling. My youngest daughter got married last year. You know, I can still remember when I discovered I was pregnant with her. How she too will soon be a mother. Congratulations, madam, I said, picking up a wooden comb. Thank you. So, When is this wedding? I asked Iyabolu.
Sometime in June, maybe. They have not fixed the exact date yet. Hope the elections won't affect the preparations,
my customer said, bending her head so I could part her hair into 4 equal parts.
That's why they are still waiting to fix the exact date. My brother wants to be sure about the exact date the elections will take place.
I scoffed. Do you think there will be any elections? This Baba Angida, who has postponed the date time and time again?
Transition,
my customer said.
This is a transition. A transition is a process. It is not a one-off event. There is no need for us to be cynical. There have been setbacks, but I think they are quite understandable.
Me? I don't think the man is going anywhere. This election story is another fraud. They're just deceiving us, these military people.
This time he is leaving, I'm telling you. Just remember I said so. At least we have civilian governors now, and the legislators will take office by December. It is a gradual transition, step by step, my dear. That is the only way to ensure lasting change.
I stuck the wooden comb in one half of her hair and began to braid the other half. I had no faith in the so-called gradual transition. My customer was obviously invested in the whole process. She reeled off dates and statistics, like someone who spent her days reading newspapers. I nodded as she explained why the federal military government had every right to create and fund the 2 political parties that existed in the country. She found a way to justify the fact that the government had written the constitution of both parties and designed their emblems.
Look,
she said,
it is not the perfect situation. But once we move into a democracy, things will be different. Let's just get the country into a total democracy first. After we do that, we can get everything else in line.
I let the issue go, because I didn't care that much about it. As far as I was concerned, 1993 would come and go, and at the end of it we would know if the government was serious about its promise. I had no intention of registering to vote.
By the end of this year, the government will tell us when the elections will be, and my brother will fix a definite date. And you, Iyarotimi, you must go with me to Bauchi,
Iyabolu said.
Whichever day the wedding is, you must go with me, oh.
Bauchi, ke? That is where your brother lives. That is a long journey, oh.
That's why I'm telling you now. Start preparing your mind.
Okay, I will think about it, I said, but I've not agreed to go yet, Iyabolu. I will keep it in mind anyway.
You know, if you go with me, you can buy gold in Bauchi to sell here. Remember my customer was asking if you sold jewelry. Now you look at me, Abi. I know that one will entice you now. I talk about business and your ears stand up. My brother's wife is into the gold business. She can show you all the places where you can buy. And who knows, maybe Bauchi gold will sell here.
That is an interesting idea, I said, as I rubbed shea butter into my customer's scalp. Chapter 35. One Monday afternoon, Linda, my secretary, came into my office and gave me a letter. I usually went through the correspondence in the morning once I was done reading newspaper headlines, before my daily meeting with the head of operations.
This just came in, sir,
Linda said before I could ask her why the letter hadn't been included in the folder of mail that she made sure was on my desk before I came in each day. I examined the envelope and recognized the cursive handwriting immediately. Each postage stamp bore Australia 45 cents above the image of a long-tailed rat. I tore open the envelope and pulled out the single sheet it held, spreading it out.
Brother me, how are you? As you must know from the stamp, I am now in Australia. I arrived here just last week. Please let Mommy know I'm safe. Let me start by saying thank you for all you did for me after I lost my job. I didn't have the chance to thank you before I left. I want you to know, I appreciate all your efforts to help me secure another job and get back on my feet. I am really grateful to you for giving me a roof over my head after I lost all I had. About everything that happened before I left Nigeria, I want us to forget about it all. We can't keep fighting over this thing, you know. We are brothers. We are blood. A woman can divorce you. Family can't. I'm still surprised that you did not even grant me an audience when I came to your office. I can't excuse what happened at your house. You were angry, so you beat me up. I can't forget that. We can both put it behind us and move on, but from the way you turned me away from your office, it appears you want us to start a feud over this issue. Brother me, get this right. You can't fight with me. You can't fight with family. Is Yejide still with you? I'm sorry if she left because I know you loved her. At least I think you did. You can't blame me for her leaving. Your marriage already had problems. She's such an understanding woman. She would have listened and understood you, I'm sure of it. I didn't mean to tell her any secrets. I thought you had told her everything, not half-truths. I just assumed that you had told her, like you promised. She is an easy woman to talk to. An easy woman to love. Anyway, the important thing is that we must forgive each other and move on. As for me, I have already forgiven you. I will be expecting to hear from you very soon. With all due respect, Dotun. I considered throwing the letter in the shredder, but I tore it up instead, into tiny pieces. I wondered if he'd told Yejide that he was leaving the country, if she'd given him money for his flight. The Dotun I knew was broke. I couldn't figure out how he could have managed to travel anywhere without my help. Dotun's letter destabilized me, but answered the only question I'd wanted to ask him after I'd caught him with my wife. It told me he'd been stupid enough to discuss me with Yejide. I'd been wondering how much she knew, and I'd almost concluded that Dotun had already told her the secrets I'd confided in him. It was there in the defiant way she carried herself, the movement into another room, the way her eyes had met mine when I walked in on them. But I'd been hoping that Dotun had kept his big mouth shut. I reasoned that all we'd been through was enough to make Yejide angry. Told myself it explained her silence, the contempt that remained in her eyes. I'd managed to convince myself before Dotun's letter came that she would have confronted me if she'd known, given me a chance to explain myself. Not that I had anything to say. I would probably have told more lies. But only because I still had hope. I always had hope that everything would change and the lies would not matter anymore. I was still seeing a specialist in Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and he had expressed some optimism. I'd taken his cautious comments and run with them, told myself it would be any day now, convinced myself that the specialist in Luth could work miracles. We'd find the right cocktail of medication, and all would be well. Hope has always been my opium, the thing I couldn't wean myself off. No matter how bad things got, I found a way to believe that even defeat was a sign that I was bound to win. In the weeks that followed the arrival of Dotun's letter, I felt as though our house had shrunk. It felt tiny, too small to keep me from running into Yejide. For the first time since she moved into another room, I was happy that I was alone in my bed. I stopped eating the food she left out for me, wondering for a few days if she planned to poison me to punish me without ever confronting me. I was too ashamed to force the confrontation I dreaded, had wished away since the first time I saw her, and decided nothing could keep me from spending the rest of my life with her. I slunk around the house, left for work early, arrived home late. I spent my weekends alone in my room, rethinking every choice, retracing my steps backwards, asking if I really had a choice, if there were things I could have done differently. Before I had fully recovered from Dotun's first letter, the next one arrived. Brother me, how are you? How is Momi? Are you hearing from Arinola and her husband? I have a job here now. I am making money, small money, but I survive. I know you got my last letter. Why won't you write? How can I get you to write? Brother me, let me try and explain things from my side of the story. The first time I had sex with your wife, it was to save your marriage. I still haven't got a thank you for that, you self-righteous man. I even closed my eyes when she undressed that day. You know that first time. I tried to kiss her, not because I particularly wanted to, but because it seemed the thing to do to make it less like rape. We had chaste sex like they do on home videos, with the sheets firmly covering our bodies, as though someone was watching. I honestly thought you had told her everything like you promised. And when I discussed it with her the first time, it was only because you were away. And she just got the news that Chesson had sickle cell disease. I felt she needed someone to talk to. That was all. Did I want her? To be honest before you and your creator, yes. But I didn't tell her all that to betray you. I thought you already knew. Brother me, that is all I can say. Ajoke is remarrying. She's marrying a major general. His name is Garuba. He has 3 wives already. Isn't she stupid, this my ex-wife, marrying a military man just when they are going out of power? She says the children will be coming over here for the holidays. I believe the general will be footing their bills. Right, me. I will be expecting your letter. With all due respect, Dotun. P.S. When you write, tell me about the presidential elections. There's no way for me to know what is really going on in Nigeria. I want to know what is going on. I felt no anger as I fed the second letter to the shredder. The shame I felt left no room for any other thing, not even hope. I was not angry with my brother anymore. Already, I was realizing that all the rage had been an affectation, something I'd reached for to use as a defense against shame. Anger is easier than shame. Rotimi saved me from my despair, helped me find my way back to hope. I returned from work one night, in the early hours of the next day, actually. It was almost 2 a.m. when I walked into my room and found Rotimi asleep in her cot. At first I thought Yejide had moved back into our room, so I knocked on the bathroom door, opening it slowly when there was no answer, but she was not in there. I went into the corridor, opened the door to Yejide's new room about halfway, felt some relief when I saw she was there, asleep in bed. I returned to my room, wondering what message Yejide was trying to pass by pushing Rotimi's cot back into what had once been our room. I didn't have enough energy left to think about it all. I stripped down to my boxers, climbed into bed, and fell asleep. Rotimi woke me up at 5 a.m. I stayed in bed, not surprised by the wailing, expecting it to stop without my intervention, as it always had before then. The cries continued, though sounding angrier and louder, until I could hardly believe the sounds were coming from someone so small. I got up, wondering what I would do with her after I picked her up. My first instinct was to take her to Yejide, but I didn't need to do that. Rotimi stopped crying once she was in my arms. She was quiet but tense, breathing through her mouth, punching the air, blinking rapidly. After she calmed down, shut her mouth and laid her head against my chest, I decided to set her back in the cot, but she started yelling as soon as she left my arms. I picked her up again and she fell silent. She screamed when I tried to lay her on the bed, when I sat down, when I lay on my back with her on my chest. Took me a while to figure out what she wanted. To be in my arms while I was on my feet. She didn't go back to sleep for another hour. Nestling against me, she didn't do much, just yawned and watched my face. I didn't let her go after she fell asleep. There was something comforting about her weight, and the warmth of her breath against my chest. It had been a while since I had been that close to another human being. I leaned against a wall, just holding her, until Yejide came in around 7, took her from me without a word, and left the room. That day, I got home around 9 p.m. It was the first time I had arrived home before midnight since I'd received Dotun's letter. Yejide was in my room with Rotimi. She stood up when I walked in and handed Rotimi over to me. "If she cries before 11, give her some water." She pointed to a bedside table where she'd placed 2 vacuum flasks and several feeding bottles. "Or some pap. She likes that with milk. There are nappies in the bag on the floor. I dropped my briefcase so I could hold Rotimi with both hands, surprised that her mother was speaking to me. Don't come and disturb me. I want to sleep. I'll come for her in the morning, Yejide said as she left the room. And so, from that day on, I looked forward to coming home. Yejide didn't bother to explain the increasing number of baby items she was leaving behind in my room, just handed Rotimi over to me as soon as I walked through the door. Every morning, Rotimi woke me up at 5. Her wails were as punctual as an alarm clock. I would lean against a wall and hold her for about an hour. I watched her face daily, looked into her eyes, and felt something like faith, knowing even then that this one would live. She would stay. She was not a playful child. There was already something serious in the way she held her chin. She seldom babbled. Initially, our morning hours were quiet as long as I didn't try to sit down or let her go. And then one morning, she looked up at me, one fist beneath her chin as though she was pondering what she was about to say, and said, "Baba." She said it 2 more times before she went back to sleep, as if she knew that I needed to hear the word again. Each time she said it, it was like an absolution. That simple word lifted the crushing weight of Dotung's letters and all my mistakes, just a bit. I felt as though she'd given me a gift, something almost divine because it was perfectly timed. She'd claimed me as her father. Yes, she was just a child who knew nothing about the workings of the world, but still, she claimed me as her father. I felt compelled to give something of myself back to her, to forge some connection that would last as long as we both lived. I started to whisper stories to her, told her the stories Moomi used to tell Dotung, Aringola, and me. I didn't have any favorites, but there was a story I still remember telling Rotimi very often. Moomi often began each tale with the saying. For this story, she always started by saying, "Olo molo laye." He who has children owns the world. In the time of forever, where most animals walked upright and humans still had their eyes on their knees, Ijapa, the tortoise, had a wife called Inyonibo. They loved each other and lived happily together. They only had each other. They did not have a child, not even one solitary child. They begged Eledumare for a child for many years, but none came. Inyonibo cried every day. Every day people ridiculed her everywhere she went, pointing their fingers and laughing behind her back in the market. Inyonibo wanted a child more than anything else, more than life itself. So one day, Ijagba got tired of seeing his wife cry, and he went to a faraway land where there was a powerful Babalawo. He had to cross 7 mountains and 7 rivers to get to this faraway land. It was a long road, but Ijagba did not mind. This Babalawo was the most powerful one in the world at that time. Ijagba was sure that if there was a solution under heaven, he would find it with the Babalawo. When Ijagba got to the Babalawo, he begged the Babalawo for help. The Babalawo prepared a meal. He put it in a calabash and asked Ijagba to take it back to his wife. The Babalawo assured Ijagba that once the wife ate the meal, she would get pregnant. He warned Ijagba not to taste the meal at all, or open the calabash before he got home. Ijagba thanked the Babalawo and left with the meal. On his way home, Ijagba had to cross the 7 mountains and 7 rivers again. The meal smelled so delicious. The sun was hot, and he was tired. After the 3rd mountain, he stopped beside the 3rd river to rest and drink some water. There was nothing for him to eat. No fruit-bearing trees around, not even grass. Ijagba was starving. Ijagba decided to take a look at the meal. Just one look. He was not going to eat the food at all. He would just look at it. He opened the calabash and saw that it was asharo. And it was rich asharo. As well as the mashed yam and palm oil, there was fish, meat, vegetables, and crayfish. Ijakba was tempted. His stomach grumbled very loudly, but he thought of his wife's empty arms and closed the calabash. He continued his journey. The sun became hotter. He became hungrier and even more tired. So he stopped after the 5th mountain, just beside the 5th river, to rest. Ijakba thought to himself, I will just touch the meal with a finger and feel how the palm oil rubs against it. I can tell if the babalawo used good quality palm oil that way. I don't want Inyonibo to eat anything that will upset his stomach. Ijakba touched the asharo with just one finger, just to tell the quality of the palm oil. He rubbed the oil between his hands. It felt right. It feels right, he said to himself, but it might still not taste right. So he took a tiny bit more and tasted it. Immediately, his stomach began to rumble like thunder and he wolfed down the meal in a few minutes. He could not resist or stop himself once that small taste passed the gate of his lips. He smacked his lips after the meal and washed his hands off at the stream. Ijakba fell into a deep sleep immediately. When he woke up, 3 days had passed, but he did not know this. He felt as though he had been sleeping for just an hour. He decided that he would head back to the babalao's house. I will just tell him the asharo fell and poured away, Ijakba said to himself. I am sure he will make another one for me. He is a kind man. Ijakba tried to get up and realized it was a struggle. He looked down and behold, his stomach was big. In fact, it was as big as that of a woman who had been pregnant for 9 months. As fast as he could, he ran back over the 5 mountains and 4 rivers that he had crossed. When he got to Babalao's house, he sang, Babalawo mo wabebe, alobirin. Babalawo, I've come to beg you. Babalawo mo wabebe, alobirin. Babalawo, I've come to beg you. Oni na mama fawo benu, alobirin. You told me not to put my hand in my mouth. Oni na mama feze benu, alobirin. You told me not to put my feet in my mouth. Ogun to ṣe fún mi lẹ́ẹ̀kan, alobirin. The medicine you made for me the other time. Mo fọwọ́ bọbẹ̀ mo fi bẹnu, alobirin. I touched it and put my hand in my mouth. Mo wá bójú ọkùn orí tandi, alobirin. Then I looked at my belly, and it was big. Rotimi always fell asleep before I finished the song, so I'd stopped telling the story then. I'd never began the story with Moomi's Olomololai saying, I'd believed her once. I'd accepted, like the tortoise and his wife, that there was no way to be in the world without an offspring. I had thought that having children who called me Baba would change the very shape of my world, would cleanse me, even wipe away the memory of pushing Funmi down the stairs. And though I told Rotimi the story many times, I no longer believed that having a child was equal to owning the world.